The Jakor Empire's champion, Kralthok, was undefeated in every arena of war. His name alone made entire planets tremble. When Jakor's fleet encountered Earth's research station Atlas, they sent their best warrior to crush the defenders. What no one expected. The defender was a librarian, Elara, who knew secrets hidden in ancient archives that no soldier could understand. The transmission came suddenly, shattering the fragile peace that had cloaked Earth for decades. The voice of the Jakor was cold, merciless, and unwavering as they demanded the unconditional surrender of humanity or faced total annihilation. The words echoed through every channel, every city, every home. An ultimatum delivered by an alien civilization so advanced that their presence defied human comprehension. Massive ships hovered silently in the skies, casting long shadows of dread across the land, their ominous silhouettes a stark reminder of the power they wielded. No one doubted the consequences of refusal. Their threat was not mere rhetoric, but a promise written in the fate of countless worlds they had already conquered. Panic gripped the hearts of millions. Governments scrambled to respond, but no traditional weapon seemed sufficient to counter the Jakor's overwhelming might. This was no ordinary war, no battle of soldiers and artillery. It was a battle of minds, a contest that would decide the fate of Earth without a single shot fired. The Jakor's champion would face a human chosen to defend the planet in a contest not of brute strength, but of intelligence, strategy, and cunning. In the midst of this turmoil, a woman named Elara stepped forward, her decision baffling many because she was not a fighter by any definition. She had never wielded a weapon, nor had she ever been trained for combat, but her mind was sharp and her spirit unbreakable. Elara volunteered to be humanity's champion because she understood what no army could. This was a test of knowledge, insight, and mental agility. The challenge was clear, and though fear clawed at her heart, she knew that to stand aside was to accept defeat for all. Humanity's survival depended on her willingness to confront the unknown, to delve into the depths of knowledge humanity had buried for generations in hidden archives deemed too dangerous or mysterious. These forbidden archives held secrets long forgotten, technologies lost to time, and strategies developed by civilizations that had faced their own cataclysms. Elara spent hours, then days, immersed in these ancient vaults beneath the ruins of old libraries and secured digital servers, poring over encrypted manuscripts, holographic records, and cryptic diagrams. Her nights grew longer, her eyes heavier, but she pressed on, knowing that every moment was a race against extinction. The room where she worked was cold and dimly lit, a silent sanctuary where past and future collided in the flickering light of screens and the brittle pages of ancient texts. With every fragment of knowledge she absorbed, Elara pieced together a mosaic of strategies that transcended time, blending old wisdom with new understanding to build an arsenal of intellect capable of facing the alien mind. Her preparation was exhaustive. She simulated countless scenarios, weighed every possibility, and practiced mental agility until her thoughts flowed like lightning through a storm. Beneath the burden of expectation, a tumult of emotions churned inside her. Fear of failure, the crushing weight of responsibility, but also a stubborn flame of hope burning fiercely against the darkness. She was no soldier, yet she was humanity's last line of defense. As days slipped into nights and back into days, Elara felt herself transform. The timid volunteer was gone, replaced by a fierce strategist, a symbol of human resilience and ingenuity. The air outside remained tense. Cities grew quiet, people watched the skies, and the world waited with bated breath for the duel that would decide everything. Elara often imagined her opponent, the Jakor champion, a being of cold logic and unknown power, whose mind was a labyrinth she would have to navigate and outsmart. The uncertainty of this adversary made her preparation all the more urgent. Every detail might be the key to victory or the cause of defeat. Elara's mind became a battlefield where ancient knowledge met modern insight, where emotional resilience was as vital as tactical brilliance. She realized that this fight was not just for survival, but for the affirmation of what it meant to be human: creativity, adaptability, and the indomitable will to persevere. The atmosphere around her pulsed with tension, charged with the invisible electricity of fate. This was not a war of violence, but a war of minds, where silence carried the weight of destiny and every decision echoed across the future. Alara knew that to win, she must remain calm under pressure, think with clarity, and harness the unpredictable spark of human intuition. The archives had taught her lessons of resilience from civilizations long vanished, but immortal in their wisdom. She embraced these lessons, blending strategy with empathy and logic with courage. The battle ahead was as much emotional as intellectual, a test of endurance, strength, and the capacity to confront the unknown. As the moment of confrontation drew near, Alara felt a profound connection to all of humanity, a surge of determination fueled by the knowledge that the stakes could not be higher. With no weapons but her mind and spirit, she prepared to face an enemy unlike any before, ready to fight not with force, but with the endless power of knowledge and the human heart. The world's eyes were upon her, but in that quiet chamber, Alara stood alone, a reluctant hero forged in the fires of necessity and hope, poised on the brink of a battle that would echo through time. The future of Earth depended not on armies or weapons, but on the strength of one mind willing to defy the impossible. In that crucible of silence and thought, Alara was ready to fight for humanity's survival. Alara's descent into the ancient archives was nothing short of a pilgrimage into the heart of humanity's lost legacy, a labyrinth of knowledge and power buried beneath layers of time, secrecy, and forgotten wars. The vast subterranean vault stretched endlessly before her, its walls lined with relics of civilizations long erased, their stories obscured by dust and the passage of centuries. Each artifact and fragmented manuscript whispered of a world where humans had once harnessed technology so advanced it defied the very boundaries of reality, blending science and consciousness into a force that transformed warfare into an art of the mind. Among the countless relics, her fingers trembled as they brushed against a device unlike any other, a mental interface, a symbiotic tool designed to meld human thought with virtual realms, allowing its user to shape battlefield realities with the sheer power of their mind. The ancient text surrounding it spoke in reverent, cryptic tones of warriors and commanders who had transcended the physical plane, manipulating perceptions and strategies to outmaneuver enemies with precision and grace. This was not mere technology. It was a weapon forged from the very essence of knowledge itself, capable of turning the tide of war without a single projectile fired, a silent revolution that had once saved humanity from extinction during dark ages long forgotten. As Alara immersed herself in the lore, a deep understanding blossomed within her. Knowledge was the ultimate weapon, and to wield it meant embracing the full spectrum of human potential, from intellect to emotion, creativity to resilience. Every page she uncovered, every holographic recording she activated, painted a picture of a forgotten era where battles were fought in the minds of a few, and victories won by those who could harness the boundless power of thought. The mental interface lay dormant before her, an enigmatic fusion of metal and light, its core faintly pulsing like a heartbeat waiting to be awakened. Summoning a courage born of desperation and hope, Alara initiated the device, triggering a cascade of energy that surged through her body, weaving her consciousness into the ancient machine's network. The connection was immediate and overwhelming, a flood of sensations crashing through her senses as her mind intertwined with a vast digital landscape filled with waves of information, cryptic patterns, and echoes of memories not her own. It was as if she had stepped through a veil, separating reality from a realm where thought shaped existence itself, where the laws of physics bowed to the will of the mind. The shock of this mental bond was intense. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, and her vision blurred under the onslaught of data streaming into her consciousness. Yet amid the chaos, a profound clarity emerged, a realization that this interface was more than a tool. It was a living archive of human ingenuity and resilience, a link to a legacy that transcended time and space. As Alara adjusted to this new state of being, she felt an intimate fusion of mind and machine, a delicate dance between human emotion and artificial precision. The interface challenged her, demanding focus, discipline, and an openness to the unknown, but in return, it offered unparalleled insight and power. Through this connection, she glimpsed strategies beyond comprehension, histories of battles fought on mental planes, and the raw potential locked within the human mind when freed from physical constraints. But this power came with a warning embedded deep within the archives, a reminder that knowledge wielded without wisdom could just as easily destroy as create, that the mind's infinite possibilities were a double-edged sword requiring balance and strength. Alara's emotional resilience became as crucial as her intellect. Fear, doubt, and hope battled within her, but she learned to channel these feelings into a source of strength, forging a mental fortress capable of withstanding the pressures of the imminent confrontation. The bond with the ancient technology transformed her understanding of the coming battle. This was not merely a fight for survival, but a test of human potential, a clash between cold alien logic and the unpredictable, passionate ingenuity of humanity. Every moment spent connected to the interface deepened her resolve, sharpening her strategic vision and expanding her awareness to dimensions she had never imagined. The ancient archives had offered her more than lost technology. They had given her the means to stand against annihilation with a weapon born from the very heart of human history and spirit. As she withdrew from the interface, breath heavy and mind alight with newfound power, Alara knew the battle ahead would be unlike any other. She was no longer just a volunteer or a scholar. She was a guardian of humanity's legacy, a wielder of knowledge as a weapon, and the beacon of hope in a darkening world. The mental bond had shocked her, challenged her, and changed her, but had also prepared her to face the Jakor champion with a strength deeper than any physical force. The fate of Earth now rested on her ability to master this ancient power and use it to outthink an enemy whose technology was alien, but whose vulnerabilities could be exposed through the very essence of human ingenuity. With a heart pounding with determination and a mind sharpened by the echoes of forgotten ages, Alara stepped forward, ready to turn knowledge into the ultimate weapon and prove that even in the face of cosmic terror, humanity's spirit could shine brightest in the darkest hours. The world around Alara dissolved into light, the physical plane vanishing as the mental interface pulled her into the virtual arena, an endless realm built not of steel or stone, but of memory, emotion, and the raw architecture of consciousness itself. This was a place unlike any battlefield in history. Landscapes formed from the fragments of thought, from personal experience, dreams, and buried fears, morphing and folding in real time based on the minds that occupied it. When she opened her eyes in this place between realities, the sky above was split into shifting hues of storm and flame, with ground that rippled like liquid and shattered like glass underfoot, all of it alive with the intensity of two minds locking into conflict. Across from her, towering and still, was Kralthok, the Jakor champion, a being forged not only in the crucible of a species' warborn traditions, but amplified by centuries of genetically encoded combat instincts and training designed to crush resistance. He stood nearly twice her height, a figure encased in psychic armor sculpted from ancestral memory, eyes like burning coals locked onto her, exuding the calm of a predator who had never tasted defeat. As the arena adjusted to the psyche of its combatants, it shifted violently between Alara's inner memories, her childhood home, the crumbling library vaults, the ruins of ancient cities, and Kralthok's nightmarish recollections of blood-soaked moons and screaming battlefields where his enemies had been annihilated without mercy. The battle began not with motion, but with presence. Energy pulsed outward from both minds, shaping terrain, summoning illusions, and establishing mental territory. Kralthok's opening move was devastating. a psychic strike that sent waves of pure force across the arena, turning the landscape into a battlefield of fire and metallic shards. He was brute strength personified, channeling aggression through mental constructs that resembled massive weapons and beasts from his ancestral past. They charged her, silent and monstrous, every attack a test of her ability to think faster than instinct, to survive not by resisting force with force, but by redirecting it through misdirection, prediction, and manipulation. Alara responded with calculated grace, drawing upon the training embedded into her through sleepless weeks with a mental interface. Instead of countering strength with more strength, she focused on shifting perception, summoning memories of peace, of triumph, of unexpected reversals, to fracture Kralthok's rhythm. She manipulated the terrain subtly, changing the texture of the battlefield, warping time perception slightly in her favor, creating phantom versions of herself to fragment his focus. Her mind raced, parsing endless possibilities, reacting to his patterns, and planting mental decoys he would unknowingly follow. With every engagement, she felt the arena respond to her confidence, her creativity, her willingness to embrace risk and ambiguity, qualities the Jacor's structured logic couldn't fully predict. But the strain was immense. Alara's body back in the physical world trembled with the neurological feedback from each mental clash, her breath shallow, heartbeat rapid, sweat pooling on her palms. Inside the virtual space, her consciousness fought to remain centered amid a psychological war zone designed to shatter resolve. Kralthok adjusted quickly, learning from her moves, his mind adapting like a living algorithm. He introduced chaos into the battlefield, forcing her to retreat into a mental projection of a childhood memory. A warm field on earth with wind in the grass and the sound of birds in the air. A moment of serenity that gave her just enough clarity to counter his brutal offensive. She drew power from that place, rooted her thoughts in it, and launched a flurry of mental strikes. Manipulations of memory, redirections of focus, phantom pain projected into his system to slow his reactions. The arena rippled violently, shifting between states as their conflict escalated, the space now flickering between a desolate alien wasteland and fragments of ancient human cities, echoes of lost empires colliding with Jacor war temples. Alara's mind burned with effort as she layered strategy over instinct, stacking deception upon insight, building mental loops that Kralthok fell into again and again. Even as he roared in silent fury, his psychic avatar lashing out with terrifying speed. Despite her apparent disadvantage in raw power, Alara's strength lay in her unpredictability, her emotional range, the very humanity that the Jacor saw as weakness. She turned grief into camouflage, hope into momentum, and doubt into distraction, weaving a net of mental projections so intricate that even the champion began to hesitate, his focus slipping as he found himself reliving unfamiliar emotions not his own. Fear, loss, vulnerability, all implanted by her carefully curated memory manipulation. But even as she gained the upper hand, Alara knew she was walking a razor's edge. Her brain felt like it was overheating, her thoughts fraying at the edges under the immense strain. One mistake, one falter, and Kralthok's superior force could crush her instantly. He sensed her exhaustion and pushed harder, unleashing a psychic barrage of ancient Jacor war chants, psychological constructs that brought with them the weight of thousands of battles. The arena turned pitch black, stars overhead falling like tears of fire, and suddenly she stood alone on a platform of light floating in an abyss, the champion's presence pressing against her mind like a tidal wave. For a moment, she faltered, her vision swimming, the fear almost overwhelming, but she clung to a single thought, the faces of those she fought for, the earth below that still believed in her. And in that clarity, she found her next move. With a breath of sheer will, she rewrote the arena, projecting a memory of the first time she saw the stars through a telescope, the feeling of awe and infinite possibility that had drawn her to knowledge in the first place. The darkness peeled back, replaced by a vast expanse of celestial beauty, and for the first time, Kralthok hesitated, not from confusion, but from exposure to something alien to him, wonder. She struck then, not with force, but with a cascade of data, logic puzzles nested within emotion, ethical dilemmas spiraling into paradoxes, overwhelming his structured mind with the chaos of creativity. It wasn't a final blow, but it was enough to shift momentum. The battle, once even, now leaned subtly in her favor, and though the tension was still unbearable, a seed of doubt had been planted in the Jacor champion. Alara's pulse thudded like a drumbeat inside her skull, her thoughts threading razor-thin paths through the chaos. And though exhaustion threatened to pull her under, she pressed forward, knowing that this was only the beginning of the real war. The first contact, the first test, the first wound struck against the darkness. The battlefield was no longer just a place of confrontation. It had become a realm of unraveling identity, a psychological crucible where every memory, fear, and forgotten truth could be weaponized. Alara stood amidst the swirling chaos of collapsing constructs and flickering illusions, the virtual arena trembling with instability as she narrowed her focus, her mind sharpened to a single intent. Find the crack in Kralthok's armor, the fracture beneath the invincible mask he wore so flawlessly. The Jacor champion loomed before her, still immense and formidable, his form flickering with the residual energy of their last exchange. But there was a change now, something subtle, a hesitation, a fractional delay in his responses, a flicker in the depths of his mental presence that revealed uncertainty where before there had only been ruthless confidence. Alara latched onto it, her thoughts moving like blades, precise and merciless. She knew that strength could be deceiving, that even the most indestructible minds could carry hidden wounds, and the archives had whispered to her of Jacor history, of their cultural purges, their deliberate erasure of anything that didn't conform to their ideal of power. Somewhere within Kralthok, buried under decades of war programming and ancestral pride, was a memory, a truth so long denied it had become a threat to the very structure of his identity. Alara dove into that vulnerability, weaving psychic threads into his mind, gently at first, not as an invader, but as a storyteller. She projected images drawn from fragmented Jacor records, visions of scholars burned for asking forbidden questions, of temples destroyed to silence a generation, of a child standing before sacred text, eyes wide with awe before the elders took it away. The arena began to change, responding not just to Alara's will, but to Kralthok's inner dissonance, the battlefield crumbling into ruins not of her design, but his, a cathedral scorched by fire, echoes of voices long silenced crying out from shattered walls. Kralthok's avatar faltered, his expression unreadable yet strained, and Alara knew she had found the right thread. She didn't attack directly. Instead, she revealed, she peeled back the layers of his programming, not through violence, but through memory. She summoned an echo of his mother, not a weaponized form, but a soft presence, her voice reciting an ancient tale the Jacor had once told their young before the Empire declared such things wasteful. It was a lullaby, the melody fragmented and worn with time, yet unmistakably real. Kralthok's form pulsed with conflicting energy as his mind tried to reject the memory, to reframe it as illusion, but the truth had weight, and Alara had found the moment that mattered. A personal truth his training could not erase. His aura flickered, his psychic armor cracking. She pressed on, calling forth a library, one from his own forgotten childhood, a place erased from all records, yet etched deeply in the subconscious, a sacred archive of stories and questions, of wonder before the indoctrination of war. The arena groaned as the mental fabric strained, reacting to the rising emotional charge. For the first time, Alara saw uncertainty in his eyes, and with it, a weakening of his psychic projections. His attack slowed, became erratic, shaped by confusion and inner conflict. He tried to regain control, summoning monstrous constructs from his ancestral memories, but they flickered, unstable, as if unsure of their own reality. She met them not with force, but with mirrors, mental illusions of forgotten Jacor scholars, ghostly figures who stood unarmed and unafraid, whispering the forbidden questions that had once threatened an empire. What if strength is not survival? What if memory holds more than pain? What if power lies in knowing, not erasing? She couldn't. This was her moment to unseat a titan without ever lifting a weapon, to prove that identity and history were more powerful than any mental force. The arena shifted again, melting into a hybrid of their memories, a field of starlight littered with books and broken blades, half human, half Jacor, a fusion of what was and what could have been. In this space, Kralthok stumbled, disoriented, and Alara stepped closer, projecting not dominance, but empathy. She showed him a memory of herself as a child, curious, fragile, asking questions of a universe that had no answers, facing loss without understanding, growing in the ruins of a world that had forgotten how to listen. It was not weakness she showed, but strength born of seeking. She felt him real, not from pain, but from recognition. For a heartbeat, their minds met in quiet reflection, the war paused by the sheer gravity of shared vulnerability. But it was enough. That sliver of connection unraveled something deep within the Jacor warrior, and the arena reacted violently, his side collapsing into shadow and silence. His constructs fell apart, his armor shattered, his psychic signature wavered, flickering like a dying star. He screamed, not with rage, but with something older, grief. Grief for what had been taken from him, for what he had been forced to forget. Alara held her position, steadying her breath as the world convulsed around her, holding the mental thread as tightly as she could, guiding the collapse with care rather than cruelty. The battle was not yet over. She knew the danger of a wounded mind, the unpredictability of one torn between realities. But for the first time since stepping into the arena, she saw Kralthok no longer as a destroyer, but as a prisoner of his own people's fear of truth. The warrior dropped to one knee, his projection glitching as if his consciousness itself was splitting under the weight of contradiction. He looked at her not with hatred, but with something that might have been pleading or perhaps simply understanding. Alara didn't speak. Words were unnecessary. The connection between them was raw and unfiltered, an unspoken realization that strength wasn't found in domination, but in the courage to face what one had been told to forget. In that silent exchange, she delivered the blow no force ever could, the return of memory. And it changed everything. The silence after Kralthok's breakdown was deceptive, the kind of silence that hummed with unresolved tension, the stillness before the shape of the battle transformed completely. Alara stood in the epicenter of that stillness, her breath shallow, her thoughts frayed at the edges but pulsing with clarity as she reached deeper into the ancient mental interface, past the limits she had previously dared not cross. What she had just done, weaponizing memory, was only the surface of what the archives had hinted at. And now, with her focus sharpened by survival, with the enemy teetering on the edge of collapse, she tapped into a buried sub-layer of the system, a command layer long sealed behind mental locks forged by the forgotten architects of this technology. Pain lanced through her skull as the connection deepened, her consciousness slicing into encrypted channels not meant for untrained minds. And yet, something responded, something ancient, vast, and strangely empathetic. It wasn't code. It was a structure of will and intent, waiting to be remembered. And as it bloomed open before her like a psychic cathedral, Alara realized the truth. The interface wasn't just a battlefield. It was a universe of thought, and those who truly understood it could do more than fight. They could rewrite reality itself, not in the physical sense, but in the virtual war zone where belief shaped terrain and cognition dictated consequence. She had the power now to shape loops, paradoxes, rules, and patterns that could lock even a mind as strong as Kralthok's into an inescapable cycle. The champion still stood, broken but not yet destroyed, his avatar flickering as it tried to stabilize, his mind rebooting its resolve in slow waves of reasserted logic. But Alara moved faster, thoughts racing with newfound control, diving into the architecture of the arena itself, bending its rules around a single design. A recursive trap, a mental time loop built from fragments of his own defeats. She constructed the first loop with surgical precision, Kralthok lunging forward, landing a strike, only to find it dissolve into ash as Alara's form split into dozens, each one striking back simultaneously, flooding him with failure. As he reacted, the sequence restarted, his memories resetting, forcing him to experience the same moment again, except slightly different. This time, he made a better move, but still failed. Then again, and again. With each cycle, he became more confused, his confidence unraveling like thread pulled from a fraying tapestry. Alara stood outside the loop, her mind anchored by the deeper connection to the archive, watching the warrior struggle against his own psyche. He had been built for battle, forged to win, and now he was being forced to relive the one thing he could not reconcile: defeat. Not just once, but endlessly. She modified the sequence as he adapted, each version of the loop crafted to undermine a different layer of his ego, each outcome personalized to attack the illusion of invincibility. In one, he fell in front of his ancestors, their silent judgment burning into him. In another, he was younger, smaller, mocked by commanders for weakness. In a third, he reached victory only to find it hollow, the battlefield silent, allies gone, the triumph meaningless. The psychological toll deepened with every iteration, and Alara felt it through the link. A pulsing wave of resistance giving way to confusion, then dread, then something dangerously close to surrender. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. She had seen what the Jakor Empire did to those who showed mercy. This was not cruelty. It was survival, and she wielded it with the precision of someone who had spent her life underestimated, now finding in herself a terrifying mastery. Her thoughts grew more confident, and with them, the loops became smoother, more intricate, merging illusions with buried memory to blur the line between reality and nightmare. Kralthok began to stutter, his psychic avatar glitching violently, his consciousness pushing against the boundaries of the trap, but finding no escape, no anchor, only repetition and confusion. He started trying to end the loop by surrendering, once, twice, but the system fed the moment back to him again, offering false hope before plunging him back into failure. The arena echoed with silent screams, emotional shockwaves radiating from his collapsing sense of self, and still, Alara held firm, her focus unwavering. She was no longer reacting to him. She was scripting him, guiding the rhythm of his demise with a calm detachment she hadn't known she possessed. And yet, as the loops wore on, she began to feel something unexpected: sorrow. Not sympathy. He had chosen to be a weapon, but a strange mourning for what he might have been, had his life not been built upon erasure, conquest, and fear. In that moment of pause, a deep tremor shook the arena, not from him, but from the interface itself, as if the system sensed a shift in the emotional core of its pilot. It was more than a tool. It was a sentient framework, and it was reacting to her complexity. She leaned into that connection, and with it, the final version of the loop formed, not violent but quiet. In this version, Kralthok stood alone, staring at a battlefield he could not leave, the sun frozen in the sky, time refusing to move forward. He walked, called out, fought phantoms, screamed into silence. No answer came, and in that timeless stillness he began to break, not from pain, but from the unbearable weight of meaninglessness. Alara watched as the cracks in his psyche widened into chasms. He was forgetting who he was, why he fought, what victory even meant. The trap was complete, not through force, but through existential erosion. She had dismantled him from within. Outside the loop, in the deeper layer of the virtual arena, her body trembled from the strain, her heartbeat erratic, her neural pathways lit with fire. But she held on, One last moment, locking the loop in place with a final override, binding Kralthok inside a recursive program only she could end. And then she severed the connection, not to him, but to the battle itself, stepping back in her own mind, her consciousness blinking back into the quiet hum of the base reality. The arena was still active, but Kralthok was no longer present in any meaningful sense. His mind was trapped, shattered in a perfect prison of his own memories, his strength consumed by 1,000 tiny defeats echoing through infinite cycles. Alara fell to her knees in the physical world, gasping, soaked in sweat, her body racked with feedback, but her eyes burned with something new. Not just relief, but authority. She had not just survived. She had rewritten the battlefield, and nothing in the universe would see her the same way again. Silence returned to the virtual realm. Not the charged, uncertain silence of tension waiting to erupt, but a deep and resonant quiet, like the final note of a symphony fading into stillness. Alara stood alone now, the arena stripped of all illusion, the battlefield reduced to a neutral plane of pulsing white light, untouched by violence or memory. There was no more need for projection or fear. Across from her, Kralthok knelt in utter stillness, the terrifying titan of the Jakor Empire reduced to a hollow shell, his avatar flickering, eyes unfocused, his once ferocious psychic presence, now fractured and subdued. His mind, once an unstoppable engine of conquest, had collapsed under the relentless strain of recursive defeat and forced introspection, caught in the wake of truths too long buried, memories too long denied. But even now, even as his mental defenses crumbled, he did not lash out. He didn't scream or fight or rage. He simply breathed in the virtual stillness, not with hatred, but with weariness, as though some part of him had accepted, not defeat, but the revelation that the war he'd fought had never truly belonged to him. Alara stepped forward slowly, her thoughts calm, composed, the neural interface still humming at the edge of her awareness but no longer driving her actions. She had won, but this victory was unlike anything she'd ever imagined. It didn't feel like conquest. It felt like clarity, and in that clarity, she saw something unexpected. The crumbling image of Kralthok as an enemy faded, and what emerged was something far more human. Someone who had never been allowed to choose his path, someone shaped by force into the perfect weapon, now broken not by violence, but by a glimpse of what he could have been. She knelt before him, lowering herself not in submission, but in mutual recognition, and reached out, not physically, but mentally, extending a thought not of superiority, but of peace. There was no triumph in her projection, no mockery, no victory pose. Instead, she showed him a memory, her own this time, a young girl, surrounded by ruined books, alone in a shattered archive after a bombing raid, crying not for the dead, but for the lost knowledge, the lost voices of a past no one would ever hear again. She showed him how that moment had shaped her, how she had become a guardian not of war, but of truth, how everything she had done was not to destroy, but to remember. Kralthok's eyes met hers in the virtual light, and for the first time, there was no challenge in them, only comprehension. Slowly, painfully, he reached for the mental connection, his thoughts a tangle of grief and release, and offered a single, quiet signal: surrender. Not the surrender of defeat, but of awakening, of choosing to stop. Alara accepted it without fanfare, locking the interface's battle protocol into shutdown, allowing the arena to dissolve around them like mist at dawn. As the system powered down, reality reasserted itself, and both participants returned to their physical forms. Alara slumped in her chair, trembling but conscious, her skin pale, her mind scarred by the depth of the connection, and Kralthok restrained his pod, eyes open, no longer glowing with fury, but shadowed with exhaustion and something that might have been peace. Outside, the command room had gone silent. Monitors that once displayed tactical readouts now showed a flat line, a draw at best, the AI had first declared. But when the final sequence had been analyzed, the truth emerged. Kralthok had surrendered. Voluntarily. No record in galactic military history showed such a thing. Not once. Across the galaxy, news feeds exploded. A warrior engineered to be unbeatable had been mentally outmaneuvered by a civilian. Not a general, not a prodigy bred for combat, not a weapon of war, but a librarian, a knowledge keeper, a woman trained not to destroy, but to preserve. Alera's name became legend within hours, not just on Earth, but across neutral systems and even among Jacor dissidents who had long whispered of corruption in their own leadership. The surrender sent a tremor through the Empire, not a defeat in combat, but a philosophical rupture. If knowledge could bring their champion to his knees, what else had they been wrong about? On Earth, there was celebration, disbelief, reverence. But Alera herself did not emerge to claim the glory. She spent the first day in silence, recovering in a dark chamber, staring at a wall that flickered with residual code from the neural interface. She felt no joy, only weight, because in victory, she had seen the cost of what it meant to win, not just for herself, but for Kralthok, for every soul who had ever been shaped by the machinery of war. Eventually, a representative from the Galactic Council came to see her, flanked by cameras, translators, and diplomatic envoys. They asked her for a statement. She gave none. Instead, she requested one thing: that Kralthok be released from combat service, placed in a knowledge rehabilitation program, allowed to live not as a prisoner, but as a student of what he'd never been allowed to understand. The council hesitated. The Jacor protested, but public outcry overruled them. The people had seen something ancient and undeniable: the power of mercy, the strength in choosing peace. Alera returned to her archives, not as a footnote in history, but as a living legend. But she never stopped working. She rebuilt the forbidden sections, restored texts thought lost, digitized entire species' forgotten histories, and made them available to all, unrestricted. She believed, more than ever, that knowledge should never be locked away, never feared, never silenced. And Kralthok? He visited her once, years later, no longer a warrior, now a student. He said little. He didn't have to. In his eyes was understanding. That was enough. Across the stars, children began telling a new story. Not of empires, not of warriors, but of a single battle fought in silence, with a victor never raised a weapon. Just a thought, a question, a memory. And that story changed everything. In the quiet after the storm, the galaxy did not erupt into chaos. It paused, breath held, watching Earth not with contempt or conquest in its heart, but curiosity and awe. For the first time in centuries, peace rippled louder than war. What had once been a violent confrontation between a ruthless empire and a minor, unremarkable planet became something else entirely, a paradigm shift. The archives of Alera's mental battle with Kralthok were reviewed, studied, analyzed by scholars, philosophers, tacticians, and even poets. The footage of her refusing to humiliate her enemy, of offering understanding over domination, was broadcast across every major system, from the neon-lit corporate worlds of the inner core to the fading outposts clinging to the edge of the spiral arms. War councils were disbanded temporarily, not because the galaxy had grown soft, but because it had glimpsed a power it had long forgotten. An invisible weapon, more precise and enduring than any blade or blaster. Alera's name, once confined to dusty library rosters and hidden archives, now echoed through star systems as a beacon of something lost and newly found. Children painted her likeness on the walls of orbital stations. Holographic tributes were sculpted in asteroid museums. But Alera herself did not return a public spectacle. She declined the medals, refused the Senate chair offers, and waved away the attention of galaxy-spanning media houses hungry for a story. Her work, she believed, was just beginning. Earth, meanwhile, transformed, not from fear or triumph, but from inspiration. Its nations, long fractured and exhausted by their own petty disputes, began to realize what their true value to the universe had become. Not military might, not technological supremacy, but memory. History, meaning. Ancient texts were restored, Language programs funded, dead alphabets resurrected. Archives once buried in bureaucratic neglect were now guarded like cathedrals. Students trained not for conquest, but for comprehension. Diplomats were taught philosophy before protocol. And then, slowly, unexpectedly, the first envoy ships from the Jacor arrived. Not in formation, not with demands, but with scholars, emissaries, learners. They did not kneel, nor did they threaten. They asked. They listened. They came to learn about what had broken their champion and what had freed him. They sought the source of that strange, invisible force that had cracked their ideology like a mirror under pressure. And Earth, through Alera's urging, welcomed them not with suspicion, but with books, with stories, with symposia under shared stars. A new generation of Jacor youth emerged, eager not to erase history, but to understand it. They debated with Terran scholars. They cried at ancient human tragedies. They laughed at forgotten comedies. They read everything. And through that exchange, something ancient and beautiful began to form. A web of shared memory, of mutual narrative, a bridge not made of steel or energy, but of empathy. The galactic powers took notice. Treaties began to evolve. Entire military budgets were redirected toward cultural preservation and cross-species education. Where once interstellar war simulations had been the final training exercise for cadets, now came what they called the Alera trials, tests of psychological reasoning, memory navigation, philosophical paradox management, emotional literacy. The idea of victory changed. It became deeper, richer, and everywhere. Alera's influence bloomed like unseen light. She remained her library, the same one she had nearly died to protect so many years ago. Its walls had been rebuilt, reinforced, but the inside remained as humble as ever. She worked quietly, often alone, surrounded by the soft hum of digitized scrolls and flickering fragments of half-forgotten civilizations. Visitors came and went, students, veterans, dreamers. She answered their questions, occasionally challenged them, always listened. Her mind had been altered by the interface forever. She could still feel echoes of Kralthok's thoughts, like shadows at the edge of sleep. But instead of fear, she carried only awareness. She had seen the deepest parts of an enemy's mind and chosen compassion. That choice had become her legacy. One evening, as twin moons rose over the horizon beyond the library's transparent dome, a young child, Jacor by lineage, Terran in spirit, approached her and asked, with wide, blinking eyes, "Why didn't you destroy him when you had the chance?" Alera paused, placing her hand gently over a glowing fragment of ancient human poetry, and replied, "Because destruction is easy. It ends a story. But understanding changes everything." The child nodded, not fully grasping the depth of her words, but feeling their weight like the echo of some vast truth pressing down from the stars. And Alera smiled because she knew it would take time, but the galaxy was learning. In time, the scars of old wars faded, not erased, but remembered. Monuments were built not to celebrate conquest, but to honor turning points, to honor decisions made in silence that changed the fates of countless worlds. And though conflicts would still arise, because sentient life by nature is flawed and impassioned, those conflicts were tempered now, guided by the story of one woman who turned a weapon of the mind into a message for the universe. No longer would libraries be seen as relics of soft power. They were now strategic sanctuaries, temples of resilience, seeds of revolutions. The galaxy had discovered its conscience again, and at the heart of that discovery was a quiet librarian, whose courage was not in how she fought, but in how she chose not to. The archives would forever record her battle not as the final war, but the first conversation, the beginning of something wiser, the opening chapter of a future rewritten not in fire, but in thought. And in the end, the greatest weapon is wisdom.